Oh, you know what that is?
Is that your phone?
That's me playing the first show back to myself. Okay, there you go. That's better. Sorry about that. Although it is Friday and it was going to be noisy anyhow, so we started it in a noisy way. I'm glad that's working, by the way. That's the new Narrative TV Twitter feed that now has scheduled shows. So we have to start on time. That's the downside. But the upside is
Oh
the upside is
no!
that we get to promote things before the show. But here we are on time on a Friday with the lovely Lincoln's Bible. How are you, LB?
I'm good. I'm just checking to see if everybody made it. Because, you know, it's hard for me too. Tech change.
Tech,
Been a
change,
little one.
tech changing is very hard, but we try.
Very hard.
Greg Oliar is here from Prevail. How are you, Greg?
Oh, I'm fine. I had a weird thing happen to me yesterday where I have on my car, I have a lovely Biden-Harris bumper sticker that my friend Joni V made. She made a whole bunch of them. And someone came, my car is parked outside of my house. Someone came and put a Trump bumper sticker over my Biden-Harris bumper sticker.
Wow, that's not very.
Yeah.
So what did you
Here
do?
in the bluest of blue. I can't tell if it was like a disaffected MAGA or like some kid trying to be smart ass, but it's the ultimate like, guys, scoreboard. It's too late for your bumper sticker. We won.
So did you get it off the car? Or you just gonna
I didn't even
around?
see it. My wife saw it and went to a fury and like tore it off with the fingernails.
Are you sure it wasn't your teenager?
No. He would not have had access. He would not have wasted money on buying a Trump bumper sticker. So
it is a good.
I don't
prank.
know who it was, but I was like, okay, whatever. So maybe it's a sign that on March 30th, the inauguration is coming.
It's never too late
April
to go MAGA.
Fool's Day, yeah.
Hey, Noel Kassler, how are you?
I'm well, Zev. Thanks. Thanks for asking.
Did you have any bumper sticker incidents where you are?
No, I'm hoping that they stay on Greg's side of the river.
Yeah.
We have a big river between us. There's a reason I live east of the Hudson River,
Ooh, look at that. Throwing down some shade, I think.
I think there's more Republicans on your side of the river, I'm going to say.
Look, they're all around. That's part of the lesson, They're amongst us. I'm sure on one side of me, there's a guy who ran for president, and on the other side, there's definitely a Trump supporter, yeah.
Well, we all have to deal with that. Tonight on the show, we've got such interesting things coming up, and it's 7:30. I should point out we have a reporter from the MIT Tech Review, which is a very, very good publication and probably way above our sort of level here. But when it comes to technology, but we're going to try understand how Facebook used AI to manipulate and make a lot of us extreme, and how they still do it today, and how it's basically this machine that's running rampant. Mark Zuckerberg will do nothing about it, because if they do something about it, it means cutting back on his growth, and his growth is the most important thing. And by growth, I mean audience growth, not other kinds of growth. But he really wants that growth, and so the only way to do that is to keep the AI extreme, radicalizing people. So she's done a terrific report on this. We're going to find out why it's all happening, and it's quite serious, of course, because it's how we got to the insurrection on January 6th and how we got to Donald Trump as well. So we'll put some pressure on Mark Zuckerberg later on. But I want to start the show with the news about the Justice Department's investigation, the newly rebirthed Justice Department, I should say, an investigation into what happened on January 6th. First things first, Merrick Garland arrived, and almost instantly, things changed at the Department of Justice. We found out a lot more about what is going on, and primarily what they're doing. I'm still here, but they seem to be building a conspiracy case against these guys known as the Oath Keepers. The Oath Keepers are a very well-known group of militia members, I would say. You were helping me define them a little bit early on, LB. What would you say about the Oath Keepers?
Oh, well, they're a very serious domestic terror group, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others. Generally, the sort of meaning behind the name is that they took an oath to the country. So it's really had a very strong recruitment outreach into veterans and folks that in our military who take a military oath, or police officers. So that's their particular brand. So these are very serious people who have been radicalized and are very good at radicalizing others, have quite a bit of their own propaganda, and they as well do a lot of keep up their training. They know how to stage an insurrection.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
They planned it. They actually had tons of phone calls.
They did. They have comms and everything. They have. They know what they're doing.
And the FBI has all of those now, so they are able to put together a pretty convincing conspiracy case. A case like the one you'd put against a mob figure, like a mob family. You would probably
imagine that.
Imagine that.
Imagine that it's Rico. I wonder where that came from.
It's so interesting that it's applicable here, right?
It's amazing.
It's amazing. So they're going to start at the bottom. They've already started at the bottom. They've been arresting a bunch of them. 13 people are now under arrest. Let me show you the 13th guy. Here he is. He just was arrested today. Kenneth Harrelson, he appeared in court today. He's the 13th Oath Keeper indicted, and he attended dozens of meetings. All of these were online, so they have all these communications, of course, of him preparing for this particular day. And that's him inside the Capitol. I don't know if he's taking a selfie of himself. Not a good look. And it's interesting that the Justice Department has now said, according to at least Jim Sciutto, that the probe into the Capitol attack is likely the largest and most complex criminal investigation in U.S. history, and the number of defendants could pass 400 as prosecutors pour through massive amounts of tips. Now, all of this is interesting. And evidence. Yeah. So this guy is was the head boy of these Oath Keepers. His name is Stuart Rhodes. He worked as a congressional aide. You won't be surprised to whom. He worked as a congressional aide to Ron Paul, the father of Rand Paul. So he certainly knew his way around the Capitol when he did what he was doing. He also is referred to by his followers as Person One. I don't know why they refer to him as Person One, but just in case you want to know.
Oh my God,
that's his
nickname.
Such
dorks. They're such goddamn dorks.
And
it's a translation of Alpha. Okay,
right.
So
it's
everything's
from
coded.
Fucking James Bond. It's okay, number one. What's okay, number two? Number two is a piece of shit. Okay, so that's what I know that from my training.
That's right.
So he was on tape saying all sorts of things.
Wait a minute. What's your training? What's your training that you got?
Potty training. Number two. Okay.
Number two. Did anyone else want a number? We've got lots of them. We can give them away. LB, you want a number?
No, I don't want any numbers.
So Person One at the Oath Keepers is also quoted apparently by in the indictment. He was caught on tape saying civil war is here right now and inciting all sorts of violence. And of course, that's not going to be a good look. Mostly because the Oath Keepers also do another job on the side. They happen to be Roger Stone's security detail. You know, most of the time you see Roger Stone running around with people like this around him. Here we go. You see these guys behind him. These are all Oath Keepers. So you see one of them is wearing a cap with the Oath Keepers label on it. And, there's certainly more evidence of them. Even the New York Times points out that some of these Oath Keepers were photographed before with Roger Stone and then at the actual insurrection right afterwards. It's not a good look for the president's former not even former, current advisor. And so here we are facing what could be a RICO investigation that could lead us all the way to Roger Stone. Anyone want to talk about that?
That picture is ridiculous. That picture is ridiculous. It looks like a middle school production of like Batman or something, where he's the Penguin and he's got the henchman in the back and oh my God, the simulations. I need another. I need a drink.
Does this remind you, Noel, of the bikers for Trump and the security that he doesn't it have that Spetsnaz vibe to it, that whole thing?
It definitely does. And, it's sad to say Roger Stone went to high school about 3 miles from where I'm sitting now in Cross River. He went to John Jay High School way before my time.
Your side of the river or Greg's side of the river?
My side. Oh, wow. So a point in the, a negative on this side of the river,
Yeah,
but
happens.
John
okay.
Jay, the leafy Westchester suburbs, and everybody knows who Roger Stone is. The Oath Keepers guy, I remember about a year ago, I was at a meeting on the Upper East Side, sort of for this fellowship thing that I'm involved in. And it's not like an oath keeper, it's like a normal kind of thing. And this guy was visiting from Pennsylvania, and he was like working construction, because there's a lot of big construction happening on the Upper East Side. And he was wearing an oath keeper's cap, you know, and he was otherwise like a mild-mannered white guy in his mid-50s, you know, who was, you know, probably a crane operator or something. And I remember thinking, like, how crazy is it how open this guy is with this thing? Because I knew what the Oath Keepers were, but it was just like the fact that he was advertising it, and he knew he was behind enemy lines. You know, this church we were in was like Jackie O's former church. You know, it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't his place, but he was sort of flaunting it. So I think it, you know, they were planning this for a while, you know, like I don't think they knew they had to attack the Capitol, obviously, until Trump lost. But my point is, they started building the army a long time ago, and Roger was a big part of that. And I knew Sam Nunberg, you know, personally in those days. And I think like Roger Stone got pardoned for a reason. You know, I think Trump needed to put him back in service, and that's what we saw, you know, come November and on. It was like Roger was a tactical guy. You know, Roger was probably in the room on January 5th when they had the private meeting at the Trump Hotel and stuff. So Roger would have been like the general of the, you know, Oath Keepers,
of the Oath Keepers,
you know, Armada or whatever you want to call these guys.
So you would have had like a real, I mean, they probably have a really good case against Stone. I mean, other than the fact that he's probably pardoned for everything preemptively. I don't know if he is, but he might be.
He can't be for this.
Oh, he can't be? All right. Oh, no. He can't. Okay. So then they've got 13 guys that they're squeezing right now, to use a term that I would never otherwise use, but squeezing them for information on Roger Stone. And then, you know, they're going to get all the information because they basically have it on tape already. One or two of these guys has got to flip. Maybe all 13 will flip. And then what do? You go after Roger's boss. I mean, if Roger wants to talk about what Donald Trump did, will Roger throw Donald under the bus? I don't know. But I'm sure Donald was very aware of everything that was going on during the planning stages of his insurrection.
Oh, yeah. I have can I float a theory? I don't know.
Welcome to.
I want to be responsible. So just know that this is my theory. I'm being responsible. You know, I have got a little vodka here with me. It's Friday. My brain is burnt. But from January 6th to January 20th, is enough time to just write up some pardons. So I think everybody should sort of brace for that. And Flynn got a pardon from Trump and we've talked about this before, that was very universal. It actually even had an indication of sort of saying future crimes. And although people go, oh, you can't pardon for future crimes, if those crimes can be connected conspiratorially to other individuals involved in the Russia investigation, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. Roger Stone, who was also investigated. I mean, his lawyers could finagle that. So I think the Flynn pardon is a real problem and a real indicator. And I'm just very curious about, and I would love for him to be hauled in front of the Senate so we can hear from him under oath. But why did Bill Barr quit? Did he quit because Donald said, hey, we're going to do this thing. If it goes violent, I need you to tell me what kind of charges might be coming down for my buddies here, Stone and Flynn and Giuliani and my kid, right? So that we can have these pardons ready. This is my theory. I know nothing. The only thing I know for certain is that Mike Flynn did get this great big broad pardon, because that's out, and we know that. But I just think there's something about Bill Barr leaving.
Oh, he knew.
And
he knew it was coming.
He knew, but why? But why leave? What was he being asked to do? That's what I'm saying. Is he was asked to do something. I don't think he just witnessed stuff and said, I'm out. Because look at all this shit he witnessed and he stayed in, right? Something he didn't want to be connected to an act.
Well, he didn't want to be involved. He would get prosecuted potentially.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. You know, he got out of the way so he wouldn't get prosecuted. I mean, sure, he would have known, and that would be the reason to walk away from that. That would be the main reason for him to walk away. Also, I don't know how that affects Trump's. Trump has no pardon, as far as we know, has no pardon that we know of. I mean, does that mean that he can still be investigated, even though Roger Stone may not be? That's possible still, right? And then Roger Stone would
Everybody can be
testify still.
investigated.
Yeah,
Everybody
right.
can be
Yeah.
investigated.
And it can be
No,
indicted.
Roger Stone is being investigated. Let's just
Yeah.
say.
Yes.
And I would
Yeah.
think they would make him go through all of the stuff and argue the validity of the pardon right to the last minute,
Right.
and at least bankrupt him, right? And as for Barr, I mean, my thinking on that is that as much as we don't like him and our disdain for him is well documented, his MO the entire time was his whole unitary, what is it, the unitary executive theory, and the president can do this and the president can do that. I think maybe he even knew it drew the line at insurrection. Like that doesn't really have anything to do with unitary theory, right? Or whatever the hell it's called. Like that is even if you're trying to come at it from a legal standpoint, however batshit your legal justification is, there is no legal justification for what happened on January 6th, period.
Right.
And he was probably all right.
Right. Or Donald could have just been, because he was angry at Barr, he could have just been his foul self that he is, Noel, and Barr was like, I'm out. This guy's saying stuff.
Trump had certainly soured on Barr. We all know that, because Barr wasn't shutting down like the recounts and things like that. But I think, and I remember tweeting the day I heard he was quitting, I think he got wind of what the plan was. And I think even for Bill Barr, the guy who had Epstein murdered and the guy who got the dudes who did El Mazote acquitted. El Mazote was a massacre where you guys know what happened in El Salvador, and we were catching babies on American bayonets and stuff. That wasn't a bridge too far for Bill Barr. He got Elliot Abrams and all those guys off. I think when he got wind of what Trump was doing, and I think Trump probably called him up and said, "Hey, Billy, we're going to need some pardons, pre-written up for these guys after we succeed." I think Barr was like, "I'm out of here. This is too hanky for me. I'm going to go back and be my Opus Dei self somewhere and get a, university, provost position or something." But like even Bill Barr was like, "No, dude, this is nuts."
Although you're absolutely right, LB, he should be holed up in front of Congress and he should be asked these questions. And there's no reason why he shouldn't be. So it would be interesting to see if they do that. Let's move on to another distasteful person in some people's minds. Piers Morgan.
Oh.
You guys know who Piers Morgan is, right? He did a CNN thing when Larry King went off CNN. He did the hour at 9 p.m. on CNN. And then he went back to Britain, where he's now the host of their morning show. And he got into a big fight this week with Meghan Markle, the princess. And you've got all the scoop on that, Noel.
Yeah, well, you left out Piers' the apex of his career, which was he was on Celebrity Apprentice, and he was on
yes, of course.
the first season, and he won. He was the winner, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And what I remember is he hated Omarosa, and I was his escort, and he hated Omarosa with a fierceness and a passion that was like, it was something to behold. I remember standing in the hallway at SNL at 8H and being like, "Dude, you're taking this too far." Because he was like foaming at the mouth, like, "I freaking hate her," spittle coming out of his mouth.
Wow.
And it's how he bonded with Trump too, because that sort of like resentment, like he was nurturing that resentment, and I think it was more than just who she was on the show. I think it had to do with she was a black woman. She's also was a very attractive woman. So in hindsight, maybe he tried to hit on her or something and she rebuffed him, because his vitriol to her didn't match the crime. You know what I mean? It was like, this is a game show, dude.
Although let's face it, Omarosa is pretty distasteful. I mean, just her act. I mean, you
Omarosa?
have to. Yeah. She's not someone you would admire in any way. I mean, personally.
Yeah. Of course not. But what I'm trying to get at, and it was also edited that way. They edited the show to make her such a villain. Like,
is reality TV not real? Oh no!
Sorry to break it to you. She didn't deserve the kind of single-minded hatred that he seemed to have towards her. Her role was the heavy on the show. It wasn't like he came across as a nice guy. There's
an interesting parallel there, because he doesn't seem to like Meghan Markle very much either.
That's my point.
And after Oprah's interview this week, it was quite interesting to see them react on British television. He had to quit his job. So he goes on TV the next day after the Oprah interview and says, "I don't believe Meghan. She lies about things. I don't believe what she's saying." He does it in much more, intense way than I was saying it there. But nevertheless, he gets a lot of complaints, and then the next day he gets fired off his show after he was confronted by his co-host. So he's without a show because some people would say that he can't criticize the interview, which is a bit disappointing because there's a lot to criticize about that interview, even though Meghan Markle clearly has a case.
Is that to me?
Anybody?
I didn't watch the interview, so I'll sit it out.
Neither did I.
Okay.
I
did.
Okay.
I watched it. I admit
Let's go.
it. I turned into a girl and watched the interview because
Hey,
I
I
tend not
watched
to
it.
watch that. I know. I tend not to watch those sort of palace intrigue things because literal palace. I don't care, but I do like how Oprah interviews people. I was like, I want to. She's so good at interviewing. Zev, you could talk about this a lot.
Yeah, I have.
But you really can. But here's the thing. This woman, regardless of whatever the stories and people's point sides, and is she being authentic, blah, blah, she was really clear about the distress that she was under and that she was suicidal. And she was clear about it. And what was causing her to be in that place. We got to have Greg. Okay, Greg, you got to mute next time. Greg. So
I did.
Oh, no, it didn't work. So
Oh, sorry.
For him to come back on the next day, they do have regulation and rules over there that are much stronger than what we have here. And he broke them, right? There were all these complaints coming in because he went for her jugular. And if somebody's saying, look, I was suicidal, I was this distressed, I was going to cause harm to myself because of this, at least follow the regulations and the rules next time you're on the air with that particular circumstance. And so that was my feeling about him. Good, he's gone because he was horrible, right? And nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves for someone to intentionally continue because they can't stop it, like he couldn't control himself, or because he had an agenda. Who knows? But he went even harder on her than he ever had gone before, and he was the worst one in the press against her. With this woman saying, "I'm going to hurt myself if you keep doing this."
Yeah,
right?
It's hard to defend what they did to her, especially in the press. It was just unfair. I've worked with him a little bit. I've done a few shows with Piers. He's a good guy most of the time. I mean, I thought he was really easy to work with, considering you'd expect this kind of bombastic personality to work, to walk you through the door. Noel, did you find him easy to work with? Was he pleasant?
He wasn't that pleasant, not to contradict you, but he was pretty arrogant, and he was single-mindedly pissed at Omarosa when I worked with him. And I worked with him for a finale, for an evening as we're standing in the hallway. And he's like, basically, I don't care what happens as long as she doesn't win. I hate her, And he interviewed a friend of mine, Chelsea Handler, and she shared the clip this week. She was a guest on his show on CNN, and he was horrible to her. He started reading his notes when she was speaking, and she called him on his BS. She said, look, you got to pay attention to me. You're not even listening to me. And he goes, well, you're a boring guest. And she goes, it doesn't matter if I'm a boring guest. You invited me on the show. Your job is to act interested, And he that's the gig. We all know that, right? But he doesn't like to be criticized. And when he walked off set in London, it was because the other weatherman gave a very impassioned monologue about how unfair it was that what Piers had done and how he personally attacked this woman that he tried to date, that rebuffed him, that we haven't mentioned, that they had gone on a date, and then she wanted nothing to do with him. So, there was personal, invective in what he did against her. And when he was called on it on live television, he couldn't handle it, and he walked off.
I know, the walking off was pretty spectacular. I hadn't seen anything. I've worked in morning television a lot of the time of my career, and I can tell you that kind of tension is very evident in most of these morning shows. It's too early in the morning for people to be really happy, so they're faking it. Most of the time, they're just cranky. And I think what we watched was a very typical morning show assassination of a co-host. When they want to climb the ladder, and they're like, "Oh, I have got you now," and I think that's basically what my read of the entire thing was. And it may be true because he no longer is working there. So let's say goodbye to him because he's not actually that interesting. And What should we talk about next? Does anyone care about Sharon Osbourne? Not really. Sharon Osbourne? No, let's move on. So this is not our thing. This is not our normal thing. But this is our normal thing. So there's this amazing article that I came across yesterday in the MIT Tech Review, all about how Facebook got addicted to spreading misinformation. And it's interesting because it's the first time I'd seen anyone tackle this with a view to it being about machine learning, artificial intelligence being used to radicalize the Facebook users. We've known for a long time that the Facebook was able to radicalize people. That's how we got so many people at the insurrection on January 6th. But in this article, we hear about how it was machine learning, artificial intelligence that was actually doing that, which is scary because we don't want machines doing that kind of stuff to us. But it's also interesting that Mark Zuckerberg wanted nothing to do with this, which is really interesting. And I'm joined now by Karen Hao. I'm not sure I'm saying your name correctly. Hi, Karen. Are you there?
Hi, Zev. Yes, you are saying my name correctly. Thank you so much.
I'm glad this worked out. We hadn't heard you before the show, and your audio sounds great, and you look great. Your article is really fascinating. Tell me, if you could briefly, what your discovery was about Mark and also about the AI use to radicalize people.
Absolutely. So just for a little bit of context, I am the senior artificial intelligence reporter at MIT Technology Review. And so I spend all of my time covering artificial intelligence. That's the lens through which I kind of look at events and look at companies, look at people. And about a year ago at this point, I had profiled this AI lab and it caught the attention of Facebook, and their AI communications director was like, I read this profile that you did of this other AI lab, and we have an AI lab, and I would just absolutely love for you to come do a deep dive of our AI lab. And so being that the AI lab at Facebook, and Facebook is a very powerful company, I obviously was immediately intrigued and thought, that sounds like a great opportunity. And what happened was they then set me up with a series of interviews with the leadership of the AI org, which is actually quite large. And there are like many different teams, many different divisions. And after every interview with leadership, the comms person would sort of check in with me and be like, hey, anything interesting you? What kind of deep dive do you want to do? And the very last leadership interview I had was with this guy named Joaquin Quiñonero Condola. And when I was looking at his LinkedIn, it was just this really fascinating career trajectory in Facebook, where he had started as the director of applied machine learning, which meant that he was the man responsible for turning Facebook into an AI powerhouse. And then immediately after, he became the director of the Society and AI Lab, and in the description it says like trying to understand basically how algorithms impact society and how to actually make that better. And that was just so fascinating to me, because obviously so many of the conversations that we've been having about Facebook over the past few years is all about polarization, misinformation, extremism, all of these things that many people had sort of suspected were tied to the algorithms. And I thought, if they have a team that's actually studying this, that's existed for 3 years, it was created right after Cambridge Analytica happened, then what on earth have they been up to in the last 3 years for us to get to a place where all of these problems are worse? The answer is they have not been focused on any of these problems. So what I asked, let me speak to this person, let me do my deep dive on this part of the AI organization. The comms person was thrilled because he thought that they were doing this fantastic work specifically on problems of AI bias, which is when algorithms discriminate against certain groups of users. And this is something that Facebook has been sued for. So in the US, the Housing and Urban Development Agency has sued Facebook for the fact that their algorithms are perpetuating housing discrimination. At least that's what they allege. So Facebook has done all this great work on this particular thing. But every time I tried to ask them, well, this isn't the only thing that your algorithms are doing to harm the society, at least if we're listening to critics. So like, how are you addressing all of these other allegations that people have levied towards you about your algorithms polarizing people, about it rewarding fake news, about it rewarding violence and hate speech. And they kept saying, that's not our problem. Like this team doesn't focus on that.
So years after this was exposed, they've still done absolutely nothing to stop radicalizing people in terms of their algorithms, in terms of machine learning.
Pretty much. I mean, I asked them, what's interesting is I asked them, okay, if your team is not doing this, then point me to the team that's studying how the algorithms, how specifically your algorithms that recommend content and rank the order in which people see things on the newsfeed. Tell me which team actually looks at the impact that those algorithms have on the amplification of misinformation. And is there a single team that then works on making better algorithms that do not actually reward misinformation? And they kept saying to me, well, no team works on this because all teams work on this.
Yeah.
And really that was really interesting because I had conducted these interviews over a 9-month period. And early on in my interview process, I talked with the CTO of Facebook, and I'd been like, it's really interesting that you created this centralized team to work specifically on AI bias issues and also other issues around the way that algorithms impact society. Why did you do that? Why shouldn't all the teams be working on this sort of in their own domain? Because Facebook is organized based on different parts of the platform. Like they have a team that focuses on pages, on groups, on ads, on newsfeed. And I was like, doesn't it make sense to just have a newsfeed AI bias team or a group's AI bias team? Like, why have this centralized team that's separate from all of these product teams? And he said, well, that's best practice. When we have a really important issue that we need to develop expertise on, we quickly form a team so that they have some kind of camaraderie, they have the right leadership, they have some priorities and budget and headcount put on that problem. And then
they get to work close with Mark, right? They also got to work really close with Mark Zuckerberg. They're right around his desk, according to your article.
Exactly.
And Mark Zuckerberg's response to all of this a lot of the time was, we're not going to do anything to damage our user engagement, which is basically the growth of the amount of time that users visit their site, which is... Exactly. So basically, even though he was presented with evidence that he could, in fact, stop the radicalization that was happening on Facebook by changing some of the algorithms that this team presented to him, he refused because he didn't want to impact growth. That was his number one priority, is to make sure that growth continued. Yeah. Until this day, that's his number one priority.
Completely. There's this detail in, I believe, a Wall Street Journal article that I had read that had also covered a lot of these issues that I didn't actually put into my piece, but there was a conversation that Mark had where a group of people, engineers within the company, had done some study showing how these algorithms were really exacerbating the amount of polarizing content on the platform, presents it to Mark, and Mark says, well, then change the algorithm by... They had proposed this whole thing, and he was like, no, like change it like halfway, but also stop talking to me about changing our algorithms for social good. I'm tired of that.
Just not interested in any of that. That just says so much. There's something else just before I pass it on to the rest of the team here, but it seems to me that, the onboarding of some of these extremists into organizations like the one we spoke about earlier on the show, the Oath Keepers, or even there was a case in Michigan. You remember that case where they were trying to kidnap the governor in Michigan? One of those people that landed up being an FBI informant in that case was recruited on Facebook. And it just came up as a recommendation to join a group. He said he was just an ordinary guy, and up on Facebook it said, hey, we would recommend you join this group, which turned out to be a radical militia. And he joined the group. When he got there, he realized what it was all about, started becoming an FBI informant. It seems to me that that's a lot of what this AI seems to be doing. Now, they may have stopped that particular practice, but the idea that Facebook is recruiting these militias and radicalizing these people in real lives, they're not just radicalizing them online. They're bringing them out into these militias. That is very, very dangerous to society.
It's extremely dangerous. And there are two details in my piece that I want to bring up. One is I spoke with this researcher, AI researcher, who had worked at Facebook, who he basically gave me the like very detailed description of what Facebook knows about each of its users. And he said, we can literally measure what your opinion is on a specific issue from like something like the president to something like your local school board, like very nuanced measurement of these opinions. And we can track over time how you become more polarized. And on every single issue, no matter how hyperlocal or national or international, everyone measurably becomes more polarized over time. And so regardless
of anything.
And then on top of that, what you were saying about the fact that these recommendation algorithms are actually recommending people to join these extremist groups. There was another researcher, internal researcher, Monica Lee, who had literally conducted a study back in 2016 where she found that over 60% of the people in these extremist groups had joined these groups directly because of Facebook's recommendation algorithm saying you might be interested in this group.
Wow. What was the number? How many people?
Over 60%.
60%?
Yeah.
Facebook has recruited 60% of these people in militias. Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That sounds like a crime to me. I don't know. What do you guys think? Any thoughts about this? Anybody?
To me,
go ahead. No.
To me, it definitely sounds like a crime. Excellent reporting. Like my hat's off to you, because it couldn't be anything more important. Because if you control that, you control a people. And you control a political future of the country. And remember in Asia where there was people were being like maliciously influenced by Facebook, and they told Mark Zuckerberg, people are getting killed because they're spreading rumors on Facebook, and he didn't want anything to do with it, and he didn't put any security in place to stop it, because like Greg and like everyone has said, he wants to expand, user engagement. So to me, it's just terrifying, because I think there's nothing scarier than when somebody thinks they discovered something on their own. And you can manipulate these people with micro-targeting. Kushner helped Trump win by finding people in Michigan who, had voted for Obama last time, but also listened to Ted Nugent and, supported the NRA. And then they were able to give them disinformation that said, Hillary Clinton is this and that. And, you're able to put it in front of these people, but then they sort of feel like they're finding it on their own, and then they tell their friends about it. So, if you dangle, join a militia group, do something with all this rage that we've now built up in you, in this false information, it's a surefire way to build an army that is like terrifying. It's just terrifying, because we don't know what the defenses are.
Yeah.
What's the antidote to that? These people believe it. It becomes a part of their psychological makeup.
LB, you want to jump in there? LB.
I have a question actually for Karen. I mean, I've been saying a lot about Facebook for 4 years. So anybody who's followed me, there's nothing mysterious about my belief of who and what Mark Zuckerberg is, who and what Sheryl Sandberg is, who owns these people. And how they were compromised very early, especially Mark, by the burn rate that Facebook was having at a time when we were facing recession. He didn't want to go public. He ended up over at the Kremlin, pimping himself out for some money from some oligarchs that I call moboligarchs, because he was one of the biggest heroin traffickers on the planet. That's what's going on, everybody. If you just go back and look at this guy's money, you look at why did he have a forced Kaspersky download and didn't disclose that to anybody after he picked up $200 million when he was in a pinch. These are piercing issues that I think even a Senate committee can get their minds around. But I do believe, Karen, you're the first journalist that I have seen covering Facebook, and I wanted to say this to you. I just was excited. I didn't see your piece earlier. Zev showed it to me. And then I was like, holy shit. I think that you have found the language and the way of explaining the sinister intent of this company that regulators can get their minds around, that the Senate can get their mind around, because Mark has been doing this, and Cheryl, and all the tech guys. They come in and they do this shuffle in front of the committees of doing their tech babble, their Silicon Valley garbage that just comes out of their mouth about what their platforms are. We're a platform, we're not a news, and blah, 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 blah. And all the senators get really confused because it's still like mysticism to them that an email gets sent, right? It's just, they don't get it at all. So, but you have been able to sort of say they're engineering us. And they know they're engineering us because they have a very specific group that studies that. And the guy at the head of that group is the one who came up with the engineering to begin with. So not only do they know what they're doing, they have control over this, and they're refusing accountability. But they are studying people. And that is also psychological experimentation without informed consent.
Absolutely.
That's a crime. So there's crime. This is a crime scene. This is just a bloody crime scene that's been going on. Okay, so very excited that you're here. I just wanted to have my little rant there. But Karen, I want to ask you, what about Myanmar? Did you get a chance to ask them about the social engineering that they were doing in other nations that have provably led to genocide? Are they studying that? Are they studying their own genocide, or what? What if they're going to study effect on society? I would think a genocide would be right at the top of the list of. Well,
that's a really good question.
Are they? Do you know if they are?
To be honest, I don't have an answer to that because I didn't ask. Okay. And what's really interesting is through the reporting process, I had to sort of do this dance where I had to phrase my questions in a way that were tough, but not too tough to scare them off. And what ended up happening was I had about 8 interviews with Joaquin Quiñonero. And in the first 7, I kind of slowly amped up my questions to be tougher and tougher. But the eighth one actually happened a month after the Capitol riots, and it was the only one that happened after that specific event. And the moment that I asked about the Capitol riots in that interview, I was no longer granted interviews moving forward.
They shut you down.
So they keep a very, very tight lid on the information. The other thing that was really tricky was there's a very tough company line that all of the leadership are trained to sort of stick to, and they will never cross over it because I assume there are very dire consequences if you cross over that. Yeah. And so I sort of had to feel my way along the edges of the company line and always kind of dance just within it, just enough so that I could get the right information that I needed before progressing on to try and build my understanding of the company before trying to jump over that line. And the one time that I did end up really hammering Joaquin and being like, tell me what you think was the role that Facebook had in the Capitol riots, trying to pin him down on that, I was no longer granted interviews after.
Wow. I mean, you'd think that this is now classified a domestic terror act. And if these guys Facebook is recruiting 60% of the people who show up there, then they're supporting domestic terrorism. So, this is something they've really got to be accounted for. This is not one of those things we can just keep, it's my big fear is that we'll just let 2016 slide by. We'll just go back to business as normal. We cannot do that, especially with Facebook, because they're still out there operating on this very extreme way.
This is another reason why we need new domestic terrorism legislation and laws. And the FBI has been asking for this. We don't have a domestic terror act. Facebook took care of the ISIS problem very quickly when that went on their platform, when that was identified. They can very quickly go in and sweep out a problem. They really can. Mm-hmm. They have the power to do that. That's what Karen's reporting is showing us, and that's also what her expertise is that, yes, these are incredibly powerful tools. Just like they can instigate and radicalize, they can they can clean shit up, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's all learning. It's machine learning. So I think if we can get some laws going about domestic terror, and then these groups get designated as domestic terror groups, they will have no choice but to clean it out. That is one of the ways that we can force them to stop this, because you can't help the growth. You know, law enforcement has the right to go in and tell them to stop doing this and to make sure they clean.
How much growth does Mark Zuckerberg need? I mean, honestly, it's ridiculous. Greg, do you have anything you want to jump in on here?
Are we sure that Mark Zuckerberg himself is not AI and his prime directive is not just to do growth at all costs? Just like Wall-E's prime directive was to get rid of the garbage, and I don't know.
He may well be.
He acts like it. I have a question. This is fascinating stuff, but and good. I know it's hard to get in there and not piss off the people that you need to not piss off to get the information. So, well done by you. My question is, what can be done about it? Like, Facebook is too big at this point to just, like, people on our little thing are like, let's dismantle it. It's too big to be dismantled, and it's too valuable to be dismantled. So is it something where replacing the leadership at the top will do the trick? Will regulating it do the trick? Or will, like in the movie War Games, the AI will discover that actually radicalizing people is bad? What do you think?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. Well, I can say what I don't think would work. I don't actually know if replacing the leadership is sufficient. Not to say that that wouldn't be a good first step, but one of the interesting things that I talked with former employees a lot about is the fact that Facebook has become so big that it's really beyond the control of any individual. And what happens is all of the teams, the only way that the leadership now sort of dictate how people operate within the company is by creating these like really detailed incentives for every team. So they have key performance metrics that every employee under a particular team is supposed to meet, and their pay and their promotion and all of that is tied to whether or not they meet those incentives. And the leadership kind of just like tweaks and tunes those incentives, trying to figure out like how to actually make the whole company operate better and how to make its platform operate better. But it's gotten to the point sort of where they have actually no idea. Like a lot of their investment, as employees described to me, is about trying to figure out what precisely is the right incentive structure to not create a perverse incentive structure. And that wouldn't change even with leadership gone, right? Like the new leadership would have to completely overhaul the way that the company operates from the ground up. They would have to change the business model. They would have to change all of it. So, I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but I think what I really hope to see is, I know that Facebook will 100% do the same thing it has been doing for a very long time, which is exactly what you've all been saying, that they get up in front of Congress and they say all of this like technical jargon and try and confuse everyone and create this whole narrative that the problem is so technically complicated that even the smartest people in the world can't quite fix it yet. And I just hope that people recognize that that is show. That is all for show. There are clear solutions that they've already invented that they have not been using. So yeah, that is like my greatest hope, that people start looking past the smoke and mirrors.
And it's great that you came on the show tonight and helped people understand what's going on there. I'm going to post the article again under the feed of this show, but I did post it earlier. People should really check it out. How Facebook got addicted to spreading misinformation. Sorry about that. And that's in the MIT Tech Review by Karen Hao. And Karen, thanks so much for joining us on Narrative. It's been great to have you on. Hopefully you'll be back again.
Thank
we make
you
this
so
a bigger
much for
story.
having me.
Cheers. Have a good night.
Thanks, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good job.
That's really fascinating. Hey, I mean, wow, she's so.
I love her.
She was so smart in this article. I have a bit of a thing about AI, and I know sometimes people find it hard to understand, but I really enjoy how AI works, and it can be a force for such real good in the world, and yet it could be such a force for evil. And I think we're seeing it in Facebook. We have to get Facebook. I mean, you say, Greg, that you can't get Facebook shut down, but maybe you can. I mean, I could live without Facebook. I'd be fine without it. There's lots of
have,
other avenues.
but a lot of people make their money with it at this point. Like, it's so tied into the economy that it would. Can we just seize it and have the government run it as a public utility? That's what I'm all for that.
I mean, that could work.
Let's socialize it. Yeah.
I mean, it's a criminal enterprise. It really is. I'm not even sure that the revenue that they come up with and the numbers and the metrics they have, I don't believe half of those. I just don't believe that.
And we know that that's wrong too. We know that Sheryl Sandberg lied about all that stuff too, and fudged all that stuff too, and is lying about the people who are paying, that they don't have the uptake that they are saying that they do. It's all everything about it. It's like Enron met Frankenstein meets the 2001 Space Odyssey. Right?
It's crazy.
It's really awful. It's a really awful company. And I think they lured her there because they thought, because they always need
good press.
Jargon.
Yeah.
They just need good press, but they also need jargon. They need techno jargon for what they're doing. And I think they thought, okay, here's a young person, and then she'll put in her article, like, their version, their AI version of social justice warrior. They needed like an acronym, and they needed like a thing, right, that they could pump and promote. And they thought, okay, this woman will just, they're just thieves.
Yeah, they probably thought she was going to give them some positive press, judging by her first few interviews, and then it didn't turn out to be her analysis at the end. And it seems like that's brave reporting there, and really smart of her to do that, and in a good publication. So it'll be interesting to see how Facebook reacts. I hope people put pressure on whichever Senate committee or House committees. Which would it be? It's like intelligence almost, right? Someone needs to put pressure on these guys to have another hearing, or at least do something about this. Greg, we could do COVID next, or we could talk about bipartisanship. Do we feel like COVID? Which one do you want to do? Let's do bipartisanship. What you got on your mind?
Let's do bipartisanship. Yeah, this is my topic for the week. And before we start, LB, I went to the furnace turned on, so I went to turn it off before it was loud. And where the mute button is on every other thing, it's like this is like the super loud button. So sorry. Fortunately, it was just me running.
I just want to let you know.
It's okay.
I hit the wrong button. Is what it was. I did think to do it. So
run off and do. Right.
Is the furnace okay now?
The furnace is right by my head, so if it turned on, it would sound like a jet engine was coming, and you would think that the Russians were coming for me. So, okay, bipartisanship.
They are.
I had on my podcast a couple weeks ago Eric Boehlert, who does Press Run, which is a Substack that he's a media critic, and he's really good. And his big thing lately is how the media is covering Biden compared to, covering Trump, because they always the narrative for them is always Democrats in disarray. And this idea of bipartisanship, the people in the press are slamming Biden, and he points out how stupid this is for not being bipartisan with his thing. It isn't that a problem for Biden, and it isn't a problem for the Democrats that this isn't bipartisan, this thing that they did. But the fact is, I mean, that's the narrative. And if you go and look at the press and you look at the newspapers, you'll see it. Why isn't Biden being bipartisan or this or that? It's everywhere, this fucking idiot frame, right? So what the media is ignoring are two things. First, the COVID relief bill has an 83% approval rating, which is really high. So the question isn't, why isn't Biden being bipartisan? It's, why aren't the Republicans voting for something that, like, everybody fucking wants? The only people that don't want it are super rich people, I guess, and morons. I don't know who doesn't want this. Like, people the last 5 like deficit spending hawks, in the country, like people who read Reason magazine. I don't even know who the other people are. So it's the Republicans that are going to have a problem with explaining to their constituents why they voted no in as a monolith for something that so many people want and that will help so many people almost immediately. That's one. And two, the GOP is no longer like, it's not your dad's Oldsmobile or Buick or whatever it is. This is not the GOP of Eisenhower. This is not even the GOP of Nixon or Reagan. Well, maybe a little Reagan. This has become a radicalized insurrectionist fascist party of authoritarians who are opposed to democracy. That's what they are. So to go Chris Celiza-ing around pretending that everything is hunky-dory and that the rules are still the same as they were in 1962 is complete. It's just denial of reality. And we have to, I think, as a nation and certainly as a press, have to recognize what the Republicans are up to here. They have, they did a coup attempt on January 6th. They were all for it. They, 100 and some odd House members signed on to that terrible thing that the 5 years indicted AG of Texas did about wanting to overturn the votes. These guys every state house now that has a Republican control is trotting out these voter suppression laws. They want a authoritarian state in the United States. Leonard Leo and the Supreme Court are poised to give it to them, as we've discussed on this show, and as we wrote about in the Kavanaugh series with LB and my piece on Leonard Leo. That's what we're up against. Yep. And in 2016, we were attacked from without. The Russians attacked us, attacked our democracy. In 2020, we were attacked from within. Mm-hmm. We survived. But I tell you, I'm not happy. The last couple of weeks, I've not been well because it's almost like I was almost in a car accident and then I kind of blocked it out. And now I'm starting to remember. And we were so close to losing everything. So close. I mean, I don't think I've fully processed how close we came to losing everything. Yeah, and we have to be really careful. Now, Biden and Kamala are working like 60. God bless them. And let's keep it going. Merrick Garland's only been there for a day. We'll give him another week before we get on his case. But they have to move fast because this is a one little breath, a little breather. Because once the midterms come, if they win any of the House or the Senate, that's it. We're fucked unless major changes are made.
I'll tell you one thing that they don't want to pass or don't want to support the bill, the COVID bill, was it's a $2 trillion redistribution of wealth to the poor people of America, which has never happened before, and so they're worried about to everybody, but also
people, not just the rich, the non-rich people.
The non-rich people, I should say. Yeah. They're worried about those non-rich people finding it easier to get to polling stations so they can vote next time, because their number one concern is to get people stopping to vote. So if you give people childcare and you give people who know all the other things that might be impediments to voting, that is a big deal for them. Now, that's not a good reason, of course, but that's what they're doing with that. The other thing you were talking about, which is the sort of the trauma that we're all currently experiencing, the sort of post-traumatic trauma that we're currently experiencing, I think is kind of real. I think everyone's going through it. We've now had a moment to go, okay. And then it's like, oh shit, look what just happened. We almost lost the entire republic because we've all been fighting so hard that I think that's not unusual, Greg, what you're going through. I think there is a sort of PTSD happening.
Yeah, no, it's that. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's a psychological thing, and everybody watching this show feels it. Believe me.
I think so. I couldn't even function last Friday. Everything hit me. I hit a wall. And it was rough. And then I got past it. But I think it's going to be waves. There's going to be waves of us because, we have this pandemic in here too. And we're still dealing with this horrible press that we have that, what is it? Oh my God, I don't know. I feel like they have Stockholm syndrome. And we have PTSD, and where are the healthy people? Maybe Joe and Kamala. I don't know.
But they're doing such a good job. Yesterday, watching Joe Biden's address was just calming in such a good way, and yet at the same time, that's when I started feeling the anxiety. Okay, they've taken care of that. That's good. But now, you're going to start looking after yourself and thinking about, what's going to happen, and then you start thinking about what you were thinking, which is the next election and how traumatizing and scary that is. All of us who've spent so many years in the trenches here, to spend another 2 years where we have to get make sure there's no suppression of those votes in the next election. It's a very serious threat that's coming down the pike there for everybody. No,
I agree with you completely. I agree with the PTSD. I mean, I feel like I have that. I've had that in real life before this, but it was a very triggering 4 years. But like I tell people, I think we were at the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones. I really think we're at the beginning of the damage that has been done, because Trump went away to some extent, but 100 other people came in his place. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Jim Jordan and all these guys. They're pumping this poison on the floor of the House every day. and you have all this next generation. This is what I'm concerned with. The kids that grew up watching what happened on January 6th and their parents sitting there pointing at the TV and going, that's right, those are real patriots. Look at them go. You know, there's people who still believe that the right thing happened that day, you know, that Trump is the legitimate president, you know, so I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the people that were brainwashed watching Fox News every night, that are still watching Fox News and listening to Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, and all these guys poison their minds. And all those kids are getting on Facebook, like we just learned from your last guest. You know, those teenagers are getting indoctrinated with the same micro-targeting AI, you know, algorithms that we just talked about, the adults that went militia. You know, and we know how much more impressionable teenage minds are. So my point is not to like be a downer, even though that's kind of my job as a comedian, is to try to be funny but serious. But, you know, it's like, take a breath, get your check, enjoy it, but be ever vigilant. Because like Greg and LB just said, they win in 2 years, it's all over. And they come with maces and knives and stuff. And we show up with yoga mats, you know, like, so, you know, get kumbaya for a while, but get ready to put on some brass knuckles and fight for it. Because like Greg said, we lost it. And we don't really even understand how close we came to like living under an authoritarian, you know, regime. You know, we came like within a few hours, basically. You know,
absolutely. Well, the filibuster is very important. Which is think important for everyone to know. It's the most boring thing to talk about, but the filibuster is the one thing that needs to be reformed in order to fight some of these anti-suppression laws or these suppression laws. And there are some good suggestions out there about how to reform it. And people really have to pay attention to this particular issue. We don't have to dive into it now because it is kind of complex, but it is the thing that can actually really help Democrats as they go through this process of trying to figure out how to combat this GOP attack on democracy, which is continuing. I'll be sorry.
Zeb, I'm sorry. You need 3 of the 4 of us to agree to continue to go with that topic.
Okay. Yes. Exactly. We can reform that rule. We can reform it.
Okay. Sure.
LB, I interrupted you. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I think investigations and arrests help a lot as well. We need to know what happened. We still do not know what happened. We're pretty good at tracking and following these people. Some of us here even know some of these people, and calling out what we see, and but that's not an investigation. And the reporting on it has been, some of it's
pretty good. Yeah, the Washington Post was really good today.
Exceptional, right? And some of it kind of like, okay, they're framing stuff weird ways, but that's not an investigation. We need an investigation. These people need to be subpoenaed, and we need the FBI in there. We need the Justice Department in there. We need Senate committees. We need House committees while we have them, so that people could see what this party did. The party did it. And then all of that momentum has to keep motivating people, overcome any obstacle, still crawl over broken glass to vote in the midterms, because we cannot lose the House. We cannot lose it. And no little phrase that anybody thinks is a perfect little slogan is more important than our republic. So if your slogan isn't working because it's actually helping to push more people on the right in a harder position and motivating them to come out and vote, as opposed to motivating the people we need to come out and vote, so that your slogan can become a reality, maybe dump the frickin' defund the police slogan. Just dump it, right? It's because you're never going to get it. Whatever you think that thing is going to get you, it's not going to get you. So, and I think we all have to shift our thinking to that. How do we win? How do we win? How do we win? What gets us a win? That's all that matters.
One thing that's going to get everyone to win is the end of COVID, which, God bless Joe Biden. I mean, what an incredible job this administration has done. I think it's like they achieved the goal, right? They achieved the goal of 100 million in 100 days. That's unbelievable. Sorry, in 60 days, or whatever we are right now.
51 days today.
51 days.
Not that anybody's counting.
Oh, that's half the time to achieve the goal that he was wanted to achieve. Plus, he'll have a surplus of coronavirus. So it's too soon to go out yet but we can start dreaming about what it might be like to have Coviderance, which would be the end of COVID, in my world at least. That's my new word. It took me a long time to come up with that, actually. And so tonight we're going to go through a few things that we would like to see go with coronavirus, and a few things that we would like to see come back with Coviderance. Now, Coviderance was attributed to Deliverance. Do any of you have musical instruments lying around anywhere there? I mean, maybe you guys have musical instruments. Oh.
You mean like this?
Oh yeah, looks good. There you go. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. There you go.
Nice.
Get out your banjo, Greg.
Very good. Do you have banjo, Greg?
I forgot. It's locked in the closet.
Really? We're going to do a duel. We're going to do a duel.
It's dueling banjo. It's supposed to be dueling banjo.
It's supposed to be dueling banjo. That's the whole thing. That was very good. You can keep playing.
We can't have dueling banjos until the quarantine is over, Zev.
Okay.
Nice.
We'll do it again then. You can keep playing. I'm just going to go through a few slides here, which you may find interesting or not. Probably better to listen to you play. But things that we might be looking forward to. We're looking forward to not having to order everything from delivery and actually going to a real store. Maybe. I'm kind of interested in that. We're looking forward to not having the kids at home all the time and having grandma come over and give us a good hug with grandma. We're also looking forward to not doing so much Netflix and chilling, maybe going out and working out. And those of us who do this a lot, we're all looking forward to getting off the Zoom room and getting into the boozy lunches that we miss so much. You may be tired of masks, and you may be interested in going back to the theater. So that's one of the things we're all looking forward to doing with Coviderance, is getting some theater in. It's the end of takeout, not completely, but the end of takeout every day with COVID, and the return of a fancy meal at a restaurant with Coviderance. And maybe you're interested in not staying at home so much and taking a trip to Paris or anywhere else in Europe. And while I have you here, it's also the end of fascism and the return to America. The end of the insurrection and the return of liberty. And the end of Putin and the arrival of Kamala. And also, while we're talking today about the end of Facebook and the arrival of Prevail, both Greg Oliar and Narrative as trusted sources of news.
Yes.
There you go.
Thanks, Zev.
Hey, there you go. Now I'm going to find us how to put us back on camera. There we are. There we go. That's my bit. Nicely done. Thanks, Noel. You are very, very talented. Yeah, well done. It's almost like a real show. We've got music and everything here. I think that's
what I'm ready for.
Yeah?
I need some live music. I need to go hear some live music.
I hear it's coming back soon. Soon. They're already starting to play it. It's planned for that. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're planning on doing it soon. Wouldn't that be amazing to go to a concert? Oh, so nice. What else are you guys thinking about in the end of COVID? Any dreaming? You had an interesting one today, Greg, about sitting at a restaurant.
Yeah, I want to go to a diner, and you can. The diners are open here, but it's like every third table, and you feel like you're in a plexic, like you're the boy in the bubble kind of thing when you're eating. It's not fun. I just want to be at a diner and have my papers spilled out and have waitress come and bring me coffee and just spend a couple hours there and not have to worry about, dying. That would be good.
Yeah. And some me time, because, we're all living with our families. So me time seems like a really good idea now when you're stuck in the under the same roof all the time with your family. Mm-hmm. LB, what are you thinking about?
I just, everything you had on there, I'm so ready for it. I did have this conversation today because I went to the eye doctor. So I actually encountered another human being. That's big for me. We don't do that often. He was lovely. And we both said this. I don't know why we got on the topic, but we both were like, we're not going back to the movies. Now, this is the worst thing that a screenwriter can ever admit to or say. And I'm sorry for my whole industry for saying it. But I don't like sitting in a chair that someone else was in, and I don't like this stuff. I don't like that. And I think what happened was, even though our house was set up very comfortably and we move around, we're a small family, so it was easy. But we made sure our entertainment stuff was kind of solid, right? Because we're stuck here. and I kind of like it. I don't know. So that's one thing. I think there's stuff that I'm not going back to, but to be able to go and talk to people, I'm looking forward to that.
So when the new Top Gun, when the Top Gun movie comes out, you're just going to download it and watch it on your phone. That's what you're saying? Come on.
I don't know about my phone, but
there's big screens now. You can have a big screen at home, and it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Noel, what about you? What are you going to miss or what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to orgies. I really miss large, just, good old-fashioned, anonymous.
You can still have them with a mask on,
No.
It's not the same on Zoom.
It's not the same. And, you nailed it. That's fantastic.
Boom, boom, boom.
Wow,
let's go back to my Zoom. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Don't be blushing.
In all seriousness, a plug for the arts. I miss going to Lincoln Center and hearing a symphony or seeing a ballet. There is no replicating that experience in my mind. A symphony only sounds like a symphony in that hall. It sounds great on a radio, and it's fun to watch a ballet on TV. But there's something about Friday night going to Lincoln Center, being packed in next to each other and seeing a performance that's world class that you can only see in a world class facility and enjoying it as one, as a people. And then on the flip side of that, like a Springsteen concert at Madison Square Garden, which I've worked on many and been to many, and that's healing for the soul. Music and performing arts can be like a church. They're good for us to come together and realize we have the same hopes and dreams, and we can cheer and laugh and cry together. We need that as a people. That is going to put us back on track quicker than anything else. So we all need a big shot of that once it's safe enough to do. And then come see me in a comedy club too, a real packed comedy club.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that.
I am too. Oh,
you should do an entire stand-up routine for us on Narrative one of these nights, and we'll see how it goes on a live stream. If you will,
right.
one of these nights.
It'd be my pleasure.
And that's
Is
it for
that
tonight.
not what I was doing?
No, not yet. I haven't given you a whole stretch.
What do you call this?
You were pretty good. The orgy joke was pretty good. I give you that.
Yeah.
And on that note, we should leave it tonight. Tuesday on Narrative, we have a really interesting show. We're going to look at the island of Jersey, which is off the British coast. It's owned by the Queen, really, and everything that goes on in that island is really mysterious and also very mobbed up. So we'll have a very special show on Tuesday about that, and we'll see you otherwise everywhere on Twitter and everywhere else. Thanks, guys. Thanks for another fun show, and have a great weekend. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Narrative is funded by viewers like you. Support our independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative.